Hello, my name is Peter Cinnamon, and you're very welcome to a podcast which is all about the Irish League, where we are on the cusp of double-digit games in the top flight for some teams, and if you add in a few cup matches here or there, a European run on the side, and if you squint ever so slightly, you'd almost believe that we are a fourth of the way through the season, kinda. I might be getting ahead of myself, as in I am, but it just feels so right to dive into the now annual tradition of the quarter season catch-up. That's right, every team's season so far reviewed and ranked against the consensus fan expectations. Sure, where else would you get it on this? It's another bumper edition of one of those weekly editions of Kick and Match. We've got 12 teams to take a big look at. We've got goals, about 12 games across the weekend, and on Tuesday we've even got some questions from you. Yes, questions from you to even answer along the way if we can squeeze them all in. We barely have time for a guest, but of course, you know, I wouldn't miss out on one. It's great to welcome back to the podcast. He is a media man of a Glenavon persuasion. It's the return of Dave Watt.
How are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you? Have you met many people that say, "Oh, I'm dosed, I'm sniffly"? I appreciate that was me last week, but that was more just to make sure everybody knew that's why I can't pronounce words, because there's something blocking up my sinuses. But in your world, is everybody like dying to tell you how ill they are from this not so mysterious flu that's sweeping the nation?
Yes, my own dad actually missed our two games this week because on Tuesday he ate something funny and then all of a sudden was sick all week.
To miss games, that's pretty ill. Like I think back in the day I've definitely missed school from illness, but somehow recover for the Tuesday night game that evening.
I think we've all done that, Peter.
and then all of a sudden, as soon as I got back home, the shivers came back onto me, and I really shouldn't have went out to that game.
Yes.
Second day off.
Yes, definitely done.
It's a classic. Well, no player's done that as far as we know, and it's funny. You'll see from the title, I've got a bit excited. I think a lot of people have got quite excited about the league right now, David, especially if you're fans of certain clubs. I usually leave this maybe a week or two later down the line, but I saw that big key number of 9, the amount of teams that have played 9 games so far. You know what that means? That's a quarter of the league has been played for some teams. We've had the odd cup competition, Europe, smash it all together. It's time for that now annual tradition on the podcast. It's the quarter season catch up. We're going to do a temperature check on how all these teams are doing based on what their expectation was going into the season. There's a lot of people talking, bigging up the idea that perhaps this top 6 dynasty that we've seen over the past few seasons is about to crumble. Not to spoil how you're feeling about how clubs have done. Do you see any cracks in that wall? Is the fortress about to fall down of the current top 6 of the past few years?
I think there's always been kind of pretenders, challengers. For me personally, I would have always divided the league into sort of 3 4s rather than 2 6s, if you know what I mean. And then obviously the lines are then further blurred between kind of 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. You know, I think most seasons there's usually been sort of 1 or 2 clear title challengers and 1 or 2, maybe 3 clear relegation scrappers. And everybody else is usually sort of somewhere in the middle.
Right now, looking at the table, teams that you would have felt were in the middle, or more likely that top of the bottom 6, they're starting to get notions. They're starting to get nosebleeds early on in the season, of course. But football's all about getting excited or falling into depths of misery and foreboding. And as a part of the way I'm going to set out the quarter season catch up, I've got some categories here. I've got exceeding expectations. We've got surprised but content. I've got the bog standard meeting expectations. I've then got the slightly lower, not surprised but still disappointed. And then I've got the slightly vanilla, below expectations. I probably could paint that into a darker corner as we go along, but that's our categories. So starting with exceeding expectations, if there's one club, and there's multiple clubs I put into here, who would be the first team that you would put in expectations far above what they were preparing for fan base wise?
I think I'm going to be fairly obvious here, but I'm going to say Ballymena.
Now, the talk of the town. My goodness. They are making sky blue cool again. What a chalk and cheese experience it has been being a Ballymena fan from a season and a half ago. It like last year was just abject misery, and over the past 5 games, they're dreaming big. They are considering creating some sort of statue made out of sheep's wool of Ben Kennedy. Like, this is an unbelievable run. It's a run that we'll talk about all season, no matter if it continues or withers away. Clearly, Ben Kennedy is being seen as the man that has ignited this, being the keystone of it all. There's been plenty of signings which has provided him backup. But you can go back, you can listen, and see what I thought Ballymena were going to do this season. I wasn't expecting this. They go from losing their first 4 games to winning their last 5, and some big scalps along the way. This is a very, very impressive set of results for them. And right now, fans are on cloud nine.
We've all been quite shocked. Well, maybe not at the start of the season, as you say, the first 4 games, it was sort of going well. Going on last year's results, it wasn't too surprising that they didn't win their first 4. They managed to turn it around, and unfortunately, that was against us. And since then, Ben Kennedy, as you say, has been literally unplayable. That's the sort of player that Crusaders signed when they got him. He is, when he plays, absolutely on fire, and I would say nigh on unplayable, especially when he gets given that sort of free rein. But what they've generally seemed to sort out as well is their defensive frailties from the last few seasons seem to be a little bit less obvious. But again, I suppose if you're able to squeeze the ball high up and win it back high up the park, you don't have to worry too much about defending. But yeah, I think essentially if you stop Ben Kennedy performing, you stop Ballymena. No team really has managed to do that just yet, properly anyway.
Results could have went on Saturday that saw them go top. Like that is completely flipping the league upside down. And outside of Ben Kennedy, I think Josh Carson has been a bit of steel they needed in the centre. Aaron Jarvis is adding to that spine. I believe in Stephen Alexander's hype around Kim Nelson. Got a goal on Saturday. He's been solid in a real deeper role. It isn't 10 out of 10s across the board. Like you look at the starting 11 and think that there is a top 6 side in here. I think there's elements to it, and other parts of it are weaker. But as a whole, they're looking strong. They're scoring goals. I love the nickname Pen Kennedy because these stats are great, but they are slightly beefed up by the penalties. Talking about the penalties, didn't think that was a penalty on Saturday, but sometimes when it's going for you, you ride that wave and you get that early goal. You disagree, Dave?
I think that often penalties are given for very soft fouls, but my opinion has always been a foul is a foul, no matter whether it's in your box or my box. And this whole higher tariff nonsense that seems to be within the rules. I know we're sort of going to go way off topic here, but I think it's important to say. A foul is a foul. If I get the ball and you kick me, it's a foul, whether that's in the midfield or whether that's in the box. So it was, there was contact. He didn't win the ball. Took him out, penalty.
It's funny you bring up refereeing there because I have opened up the mailbox this week, and we'll see if this is something we do on a rotation every week. But a lot of the questions that were posed to me to be talked about in the podcast was surrounding referees. From the games that you have saw, how have you found the standard of refereeing in the league so far? I think as a fan, what I'm telling myself and what I would probably say to a lot of the people that are saying, this happened in this game, why didn't this happen in that game? I think you've got to look at the games very much as their own single game. I know this is not how it's supposed to work in football, but what I've found is that if you want consistency, you're probably only going to be able to demand it within one game from one referee. I think it's hard to go, this referee didn't blow for this, but now he's blowing loads for this. You've got to just expect, if you want consistency, the rules to be in charge of, this referee in this current game is letting these away, get over it, or if he's blowing for this, you have to blow for that. Have you found the standard to be broadly okay, or has it been wavering for you this term?
I think in most games there have been one or two fairly obvious decisions that either haven't been given or have been given.
I found a number of big calls are being shirked away from. I that's what I'm feeling. We all hate that was never a red card. This completely ruined the game, and none of the non-calls have completely ruined the game. Let's just say, but I can imagine getting very frustrated, thinking, if you see that, you have to do this. I'm not really talking about that Carson red card. That wasn't a red card. I actually think the referee was totally fair, and he can only call what he can see, and I think that's important as well. But I've just seen a couple of things where I think, I know that's a tough call to call it an offside or to call it a red card there. But yeah, I think you have to be bold and do it. And I actually, not to jump around the games, I tweeted out about it on Friday night. I think the referee had to get that, or at least him or the lines person had to get
Yeah,
that goal on Friday night. I know it was not relevant to how the result went, and I know I was watching it on TV, but you think, I know it's a tough call live, but you have
yeah,
to make it. It was easier not to give it, I think.
yeah. And I think there are a lot of times where it is easier to not give a certain decision. When a referee is able to say, "Look, I'm sorry, I got that wrong," or "Here's why I gave it," and I know people don't like the comparison between football and rugby and all and whatever else, but I think that's why a lot of decisions are accepted in rugby. Not only is the respect between players and official, I think, a little bit more expected and commonplace, but I think that because referees do tend to much more quickly clarify and explain why they've given a certain decision, that then it's accepted. Okay, I understand why you came to that decision. I disagree with it, but I understand why you've given that decision.
On that very note, and it comes back to my own just personal feeling that some difficult calls aren't being made, is more yellow cards for diving in the box. As in, if that is not a penalty, then it is a dive. Do you get that? If that is not a penalty, then it is a dive. So therefore, but when I've seen fouls where I'm like, so one fan base is screaming for a penalty, the other's quite quiet because I think it probably could have been a penalty. So if that tackle or that non-tackle or the contact wasn't there, if it had all the visual elements of a penalty and you believe there's no contact, then there's a yellow card there, I believe. So we'll see if the trend continues. I'm not here to like name or shame, whatever. It's just one of those things that I've noticed. I think the referees will always say always improve. There will of course always be mistakes, bold decisions. I think that's something a lot of fans are talking about.
The other thing about it is, I think that the spirit of the game consistently is all about giving the benefit of the doubt to the attacking team. I think something around that would be, yes, absolutely, give the attackers more of the thing, give the penalty if I think it's a penalty.
I will remind you of that, Dave, 3 months from now when never a penalty. It was never a Stonewall penalty. What are we talking about?
89th minute on Boxing Day.
Yeah, yeah. You'll feel bad if that goes that way. To return to Ballymena, when you're almost going top, and let's not forget the games that they've won. That they've beaten Larne away. They have got victories at home against Glentoran and Cliftonville. Beat out Glenavon, go to Carrick and give them a bit of a thumping. There was talk that with all these signings, there was quietly a little bit of expectation that not only should Ballymena be nowhere near the relegation zone, they should be very politely knocking on the door of the top six. They're sitting there. They're currently occupying a chair. They will have to be removed from one of these chairs over the next couple of months. So it's in their hands, even at this early stage of the season. Is there a chance that they could do it? And at what point do fans start to believe they can?
As I said earlier, I'm not sure I see them finishing second,
Bold.
but it would be again. I don't think they will, but I do think that they will maintain a top six place. Again, one of the things about having a 12-team league and playing everybody so often, you can take points off each other quite quickly, and in a matter of 3 or 4 weeks, you can go from for example, yes, Lauren have only played 5 games, they've got 8 points, but they win those games that they've got coming up, and all of a sudden they can go from you know from 10th to second quite quickly. But the same can happen the other way. You can go from second to 10th over the course of, you know, 6 or 7 games where you don't pick up points. I mean, to use Carrick as another example, they beat us in the open day of the season. It's the only points they've got all season. And all of a sudden they're languishing at the bottom. That's how quickly the league can change. So do I see Ballymena being able to be consistent enough to stay there? Probably not, but I do think they'll maintain a top six position with the start they've got. It's easier to maintain momentum than it is to gain momentum.
Massively. I can see the argument for why they've got a great opportunity, just because there's some teams that are slightly flailing who would be top six sides, and it's the reverse of where we were at the start of the season. So if one of these teams from the top six were to drop out, which one would it be? I'm now thinking, well, which one are all of the top six teams from previous terms? Are all of them going to overtake Ballymena? Because I don't know if they are. So I've got to say it's in the realm.
Probably not.
No, so it's in the realms of opportunity for sure. There's probably actually other teams that might push them down in that sense as well. It might not be some of the teams you're thinking about that would be on the bottom end of the top six. So amazing start. Momentum has been built. You have to say, if we're talking about Portadown and Curry time, Ballymena and the set pieces, this has been ignoring the penalties. That's where you can see regression. Is that the penalties stop coming. People start to actually defend corners that they play in, as well as free kicks, which you saw 2 come from set pieces. Actually, all 3 technically came from set pieces on Saturday against Cliftonville. So if people can sharpen up there, are they good enough to kind of get more goals from open play? The game against Carrick says yes, but that's where you got to be concerned. So a lot of good things for Ballymena. I've alluded to another team there, which I think you have to say is absolutely exceeding expectations. Portadown, for me, unbeaten since the 17th of August. I don't think they went 5 or 6 games unbeaten in the championship last season. Forget in the top flight. Yes, a lot of draws, but that game on Saturday is a statement win. It's not as unusual as it was a couple of weeks ago to beat Crusaders, but going to Seaview, winning out 3-0 in the manner that they did, holding off when the pressure was against them, scoring the goals when they had the opportunities. They have scored a lot of late goals, which either you're going to view that as lucky or as the fact that they are being able to manage their subs, manage the games, stick around in games, and have that pressure at the end. I would like to pat myself on the back and say, yes, remember that person that said Portadown would get 4 points off 2 top 6 sides in a week? I may have got the order wrong, but they got it. And they look like a team for the first time in actual years. Their points total isn't as impressive as Ballymena, but that's a long extended run that they've got. That breeds confidence. I still believe that they have to have their eyes lower down. It's still avoiding 11th for me until they can just amass a couple of points, because injuries could... They've got a decent enough squad, but it could really impact how they set themselves out. But this has been a rather fun season so far if you're a fan of the Ports.
It certainly has. Being from Mid Ulster, I do know quite a few friends who are Portadown fans, and they've been, I suppose, more quietly confident this season than maybe previous outings. I think the way Niall Curry does, went out and signed a lot of players in the close season, but I think it seemed to be a little less scattergun than his previous forays into the transfer market would suggest. In that he's seen a gap in his squad and said, right, we need to fill that. And then, a couple of weeks later, boom, we got somebody. I think Ryan Mays is probably is in the form of his life.
Renaissance man this season.
Yeah, I mean, he wherever he's been, Dungannon, Ballymena, Ballymallard, he's been, a fairly focal point in those teams. But actually, in this Portadown team, he actually reminds me a little bit of what Paul Heatley did for the Crusaders for so long. Just that sort of nipping around, picking up the loose balls, running the channels, causing, being a real nuisance for defenses, and then scoring stupid goals from from 30 yards and stuff like that. I think Aaron McCarry's been quite a very good signing, a goalkeeper. A lot of doubts over him coming into the season. People were sort of going, well, is he past it? Is he, he's always got a bit of a wild streak in him and that. There he is sitting top of the charts as far as goalkeepers are concerned for saves. So no, I think Portadown have had a really good, solid start to the season. Would I be worried for them at all going straight back down? No, absolutely not. Because I think they have signed generally well. I think Niall seems to have learned a lot as well as a manager regarding keeping teams in the league. Because I think when he came into Portadown, there was that sort of certain feeling around the league that, well, he's good at winning the championship and getting out of the championship, but can he actually establish it in the Premier League? He did it with Ards, did it with Carrick a wee bit as well, but then they fell away. The big thing will be, can they continue this then for the rest of this season and beyond? And but as I say, I think he has learned those lessons and signed very well. And yeah, as much as it pains to say me as a Glenavon fan, I think Portadown are doing very well this season.
Everything's somewhat coming up Millhouse for the Ports at the minute. Late goals, which must be great to experience at Shamrock Park when you're seeing all these big point swings go their way, and it all comes from a Niall McGinn late goal, which is the inspired this run, you might say. I don't think there's been a better trio of upgrades than swapping out Hogg, Diao, and midfielder Luke Wilson as your two centre backs and keeper, with McCarry, McKinnon, and now Altentop, who's come in and looks to be a decent, tidy enough ball playing defender. Actually, both of them seem to be. They have conceded goals. There's no doubting that, but they've come back and they've been able to get points. And outside of that, Ubacan, tasty little goal on Saturday. Shane McCartan looks like he's starting to find himself in this team. Ukek has speed and dribbling ability when he gets it. Mays has been in and about there getting some key goals. They might have to rely on Gary Thompson to try and keep them in games. How many minutes in games can he actually play? But so far, so good for the Ports. They have a great feeling. And what a matchup we have coming up this week between Ballymena and Portadown. It's the immovable force, irresistible, whatever, rock coming to meet together. And I've got one more team in this trio, and I think a lot of fans are probably going to predict it. It's Dungannon Swifts. I said they were going to be frisky, and they are. They are proving to be potent right now, and as much as they might see that as a poor result against Glenavon, drawing 1-1, they're still picking up points against a wide variety of teams. Stanmore Park seems to be key to them, but also I was kind of thinking there, Dungannon seem to take the lead a lot in these games and then hold it or drop points. And from what I can see here, they have scored 7 goals in the first half alone. I think they've only scored 2 goals this season, not in the first half. And in fact, 4 of them have been in the first 20 minutes, 5 in the first 25. So far, if you're going to label Macquarie ball this year, it's go out, start hot, start fast, get the goal, and then hope this long ball or this midfield of yours can keep it going and ticking over and getting the points. And so far, they're up now near the top of the table right now.
They are, as I said, they're about Ballymena and their points. It's the same thing in games. It's easier to get, or it's easier to maintain momentum than it is to start it. And I think Dungannon do that well. That they do start generally quite well. They're on the front foot. They're pressing high. Um, I think John McGovern's been a really good sign for them this season. The way he played against us on Saturday there really reminded me of Paul McElroy, who played at Dungannon for a while.
Massively.
Left-footed, number 9 striker, really bustling, busy, bit of pace, bit of guile, and he's really been there out, and certainly scored a number of goals for it.
When you have that speed at the top of the pitch, it's always an option, especially when you're trying to break down a team that's perhaps giving you troubles with this block at the back. One ball over the top, 1-on-1. McGovern's one of the players right now that not only has the speed, but actually the power to hold off a player, and is looking like he's been very efficient in front of goal when he's got those opportunities.
He's been really good this season, and the big thing that I think you're saying there, the strength that he has, it takes sometimes 2-3 defenders to dispossess him. The only issue, like you're saying there, for me with them is, are they going to score one and then go and throw it away and lose 2-1 as they did against Portadown? Is that going to start happening more and more frequently? Possibly. So they need to find a way to maybe get a few extra goals in the first half rather than go one up and sit back like they have done. And I think that comes down to confidence. Like Rodney McAree, I think is always is a very good manager in this league, and he's always set his teams up very well to play very good football. I just think that certainly the way they played against us on Saturday, they scored and then sat off. I've seen them do it in other games as well. I'm thinking, if that's my team, right, we've got to go and get another, because we're playing so well. We're in this game, the opposition aren't. So rather than let them come back into the game, let's go and blow them away in the first 25 minutes. If that's when we're scoring all of the goals, so be it. Let's go and score 4 in 25 minutes and then sit back, rather than getting one up or whatever and then sort of run out of steam.
We can talk about that game on Saturday at Mourneview Park now, because my one and only team in the category surprised but content is Glenavon right now. Nice little run they've been able to get on over the past while, mainly draws, but you'll take them when you're sneaking the odd victory like you have against the Crews. 1-1, another one of these big long throws that eventually ends up in a Barney McKeown goal. I saw it live and in person. Slightly different goal, to be fair, against Loughgall, and it comes off again. From a Glenavon point of view, disappointed just to have a point when Dungannon were down to 10 men for such a sustained period of time in that game.
Yeah, I mean, I asked Stevie after the match. The first question was, "What do you feel it was a point gained or 2 dropped?" And he wasn't overly sure himself. Good not to lose the match, considering we were 1-0 down and maybe not really in it for the first half. But at the same time, given the run of results we'd had, you would have expected then to be able to kick on from there. And yes, Dungannon this season are far above even their own expectations. But that's the sort of game you identify at the start of the season as, we need to. It's a winnable game, therefore we've got to go and do it. So there's a little bit of disappointment. I thought, converse to what maybe I said earlier there, I thought they did see out the game in the end quite well, but I think that was more because their hand was forced with going down to 10 men. Had it have been 11-11 and we equalised, I think it would have been a very different game, because they probably still would have been coming out to win, and it may have actually gone a different way. I would disagree with you in the category of where Glenavon should be in your list. I think we're probably slightly below where a lot of, or certainly our own fans anyway, expected us to be, maybe from the outside.
Would you be in meeting expectations or even below that?
Slightly below.
Is that because, you see, I view it that a lot of people, as somebody predicted Glenavon to be the bottom team this year, I view it as you've had some poor results, not particularly great performances along the way, but you've been able to scratch and claw a couple of results when you've had a depleted team from a senior player point of view. Big win against the Crews. Yes, we know that isn't as impressive as it used to be, but you still got it. You're hanging around in games. And the fact that you have 6 points on a team like Carrick and more than a win over Loch All says, hey, it's better than what it could be.
Yeah, it certainly is better than what it could be. But when you look at the fact that Portadown, Dungannon, and Ballymena are all above you, when you expect, and when you look in that way, Portadown are 3 points, that's a win. Dungannon 5 points, that's at least two games, and then Ballymena are 6 points, that's two games. They're well ahead of you.
Is this not comparison is the thief of joy? Yes, you're probably looking at Portadown results thinking that's a team you don't want to be getting too many places above you. But in the grand scheme of things,
No, it's not even the take the rivalry out of it. It's just where they are as a team, as a club, where we are as a team, as a club, where Ballymena, where Dungannon. Though for us, those are teams that we feel we should be at best on par with, or at least on par with, uh, if not higher up in the league. Then, like, we're 9 games in, will not uh, worry too much yet. Although there have been fans, after a few games, severely questioning whether Steve McDonnell is the right man for the job. I would hope that those voices have been quietened over the last 4 or 5 games, where we're now unbeaten in 5 games in all competitions. We're going to the Oval this Saturday, quietly confident of getting something out of that. Whereas 2 weeks ago, you'd have been going, if we don't beat Loughgall and Dungannon, we're going to the Oval, we're going to get an absolute hiding. And then all of a sudden, you're into the first Middlesbrough derby of the season. It's at home. Could it be Stevie's last game? So I think it's very mixed. It's a very mixed bag. Compare for based on what our expectations were, I think as a club, I think we're below. Based on the expectations of what most other people outside of Glenavon thought, then we're probably on par, if not slightly better. So that's probably where I would.
would you shake my hand for ninth right now at the end of the season?
No.
Interesting. Interesting. Are you missing Prendergast? That was the big one of the most surprising transfers out this season, I must say. I know he's only on loan, but when you have two main players in McDaid and O'Connor who have had not sterling form over the past 2 years, that felt like a risk sending out your third different option out on loan, or will it be better for him in the long run?
Better from the long run, because I think in Paul McGovern, who effectively is the replacement there for Prendergast, he is younger, he has more time to develop, and he can deal with being on the bench and being a part time player, both in money and in game time. When you've got uh, a league stalwart in David McDaid and somebody like Michael O'Connor, who, yes, probably, as the old saying goes, has as many clubs as Tiger Woods, but actually, they're different stages in the career. Michael O'Connor, in theory, is coming into the prime of his career. He has the potential to be much, much better than he has been over the last couple of seasons. We know he's had his difficulties off the pitch. We're going to deal with that, but actually, he's looking quite settled in his personal life, and that's showing when he's around the club. And even though things haven't been maybe as good as what maybe some people expected, the attitude and the demeanour within the club is good. AP is at the stage in his career where he needs to go out and play games. He was never going to get the game time at Glenavon, apart from if one of those two guys goes and has a massive injury in the first couple of matches. That was the only time he was going to ever get any significant game time. However, going to Dundela, he scored an absolute worldie in his first game and has been relatively, consistent in his performances since. So I think that will do him the world of good. It means that he comes back next season having played hopefully 30 plus games, having scored double figures of goals, and feels like he belongs in men's football. That then means next season you're going, right, now we have a decision to make here because this guy's come off the back of a very good season with Dundela, who potentially are title challengers again, depending on what happens. But they're certainly going to be a top half championship team, I think, overall. He's going to have played loads of games, scored loads of goals, and then he puts his hand up and saying, right, Gaffer, I'm a Premiership player. Get me in that team. Right now, he doesn't have that argument doesn't really hold sway because most of his performances from the start last season, he didn't really perform too well. Most of his impact was off the bench. And long term, he doesn't want to be that player. He wants to be able to play a full game. And I think that's why Stephen's justified in sending him out.
Moving on to the meeting expectations box, which I have 4 teams, just the 4 in it. I have Glentoran, Coleraine, Cliftonville, and Larne, all previous top 6 teams who are in and about probably where they thought they would be, would maybe have hoped for something a bit spicier, but looking round, it could be a lot more dour and sour. Taking it team by team, Glentoran, you talk to any fans, the expectation was this could be a bit difficult, big clear out, trying to get all these new players to gel, figuring out which ones work, which ones don't. Broadly, that's been the case. There's games that they would have believed that they would like to have won that they didn't turn up for. There's been some decent performances along the way, which has been encouraging, but it's been very much the Glentoran experience that we all know. It comes the ups and the downs, and it never feels like it's consistent across the board. A great result will be followed by a terrible one, and we will begin to believe, and then we will begin to despair. I think the positives for Glentoran right now is the emergence of Jordan Jenkins once again being a part of that team. That's something they needed. That just give them a bit of spark. Frankie Vid has been hot and cold, but looks to have a bit of presence about him. Dylan Connolly might not be one for a decade from now. A real player they can build upon, but for years to come, that's a proper solid player with high-end ability. So it's not all roses there, but it ain't despair, which it could have edged towards if some results didn't go the way that they have. The way they started the season, there was some Glentoran fans thinking, wow, this is going to be a long old slog. It still could be, but it's not as bad as it might have been.
Yeah, it's never easy being a Glentoran fan. Certainly over the last sort of 10, 15 years, that they have really had a lot of ups and downs as far as, the infrastructure around the club, the applying for stadia funding. Everybody laughs about the state of the Oval when at one point it was a really prestigious ground a long time ago. The instability off the pitch a couple of years ago, all of that has it hasn't really has fed through onto the pitch, and I think it's been really evident, certainly in the way that they had to do that clear out, like you're saying. I'm surprised that they've been able to find any sort of consistency with the turnover of players they've had. I think at last count it was 10 or 12 out and something similar in. If I was a Glentoran fan, I'd probably be going, you know what, actually, as you say, we're probably just about where we expected to be this season because of the whole rebuild. If we're still here in 12 months' time, then it's a completely different conversation.
James Douglas is just the type of player that Glentoran fans have been crying out for. Looks to have a bit of stature about him, young, hungry, has some composure on the ball. He is an emerging talent who at times looks slightly wet behind the ears, but he does not look like the teenager that he is when you see him on a football pitch. And if they can continue to develop and, dare I say, build around him, because I mean, if the performances keep up the way that they have, and he continues to have such a stronghold on some games that he has been able to have, doesn't sound like he'll stick around based on the age that he's at. But there's been positives and negatives so far. And if you're talking about young players emerging, going to Larne, who they lost 2-0 to. Another great goal for Matty Lusty to add to his collection, shows his predatorial qualities. It was also a game where I guess, generally across the Irish League, we got a proper good look of some of these new additions, the Sam Todds and the Ryan Nolans, and you see the quality they have coming off the bench with Benji McGee and Joe Thompson. Up until the penalty in that game, I thought Lawrence still look a bit sticky up top. They still look like they're getting stuck in the mud, and sticky not in a good way, like it's sticking up top, as in they just get up there and either they're being dealt with by plenty of players in front of them, or they're just not able to beat a man at any point, and that. And I don't want to start to have revisionist history, but even throughout this European run, which has been great, they never made it easy for themselves. They got duffed by RFS. They squeak past Balkany with that late goal away from home. They concede the penalty at home and then need penalties to get through. And even against Lincoln Red Imps, they're 3-1 down. And if it isn't for two penalties and a great breakaway goal for Andy Ryan later on, they're out of there. So you have to be up top in the box to get those penalties. I'm not trying to wipe that off, but they haven't been sterling and firm at the back, and up front they aren't on fire at all.
No, they're not. I think that's something I think that they'll do well to replace Lee Bonus. And I think they're only really well. They knew his value obviously when they signed him, and obviously then have sold him on. But Andy Ryan and him formed a good partnership up front in that they, one came short, one went long, one went down the channel, one stayed in the box. And I think that Andy Ryan, yes, he's scoring, yes, he's very much in games, but he looks a wee bit lost without somebody else there to kind of take that load off him as well. Yes, Matty Lusty is sort of stepping up a wee bit, but not to the same extent. I think they're also missing the minutes. Leroy Miller is a big key player for them. He was player of the season in his first year at Larne.
There seems like a massive gap between Lusty and Ryan and the centre backs. It's like, I know they have Sloan and Gallagher in there, add one other, sometimes Joe Thompson floating around there, but it's like there's no one in that number 10 area, or one of the players have to drop in. And Larne have usually been at their best when they can get Cosgrove or Ives to break away, or you're passing it up nice up top and it's a ball back to one of those midfielders who can sling it in and cause havoc in there. And there's a touch of everyone knows what Larne's about, so they're preparing for it, but they are not getting the same balls over the top. And I do think Lee Bonus was the main man. Andy Ryan scores him as well, but he was definitely a pressure reliever if whoever it may be, Bolger can just hit it 40 yards and it's a foot race, and plenty of those goals came that way. And perhaps they're just getting, I think Lusty has it in his locker. Look what he did against Linfield. He has speed, he has dribbling ability, he has execution at the right time. So it's not panic stations for them. I did tweet after the Tuesday night game against yourselves that we do need to have this conversation, that there are certain things that are creaking. We saw it actually near the end of last season when they fell out of the cup and they didn't trip themselves over into winning the league, but they weren't at the same way where they were finishing with aplomb.
They don't seem to have the same chokehold or control on games that they had previously,
which is why they're slipping away from them.
Yeah, I mean, I sat on Tuesday night, like you're saying there, and maybe I'm just deluded, but there wasn't at any point in that whole game where I thought, oh dear, we're going to lose here. Maybe because we'd gone to save you the week before and got that result, but at the same time, Larne, their best efforts were 30-yard shots. One hit the bar, and a couple went high and wide. And it seems to be that and we've I think I said this at the end of last season as well. The test of Larne will be if they have a squad to compete. I'll make a bold statement. I'm not sure they even have a squad to compete at the top of the league this year, let alone at the top of the league and in the Europa Conference League.
Miller is the blow. He's the man that can make these deep runs that give defenders something to think about. You see it all the time, just in that kind of inside channel. You get the ball in, and he has there's the physicality to do something different. And he had a good range of passing as well.
When Andy Ryan is sort of the main focal point there, he's not, certainly at the minute anyway, able to achieve that all on his own because teams are then able to nullify him and then nullify Larne, certainly at the minute. When they get Miller back, when Matty Lusty continues his footballing education, will that mean that they're a bit more competitive and winning more games? Yeah, I mean, they've got. I'm sitting here sounding as if they're bottom of the league. I know they're 10th, but they've only played 5 games. They've 8 points from 5 games. As I said earlier, if they win a few, they're back up there in the first sort of top three. So I don't think it's a panic stations, but I would be concerned for them with the workload that they're going to have if they've got the squad.
It's why I have them as meeting expectations, because it's not, again, it's a touch of not feeling brilliant, but there's still this wave of excitement and energy from the summer. They still beat Linfield. They don't love the idea of losing
That
at
was
home
massive for them.
yeah, so they don't love the idea of losing at home to Ballymena, but it looks like a better result now than it did at the time. Drawing away to Glenavon, again, not ideal, but they beat Linfield when they needed to. They beat Glentoran and looked something similar to what we expect from them on Friday night. Could have been 3-0. So look, they are going to sit by and they're going to try and do what they do, pick up points every week and try and minimize mistakes. The concern will be is are we going to see more of those Glenavon games where they're drawing compared to the games against Linfield where they're getting out of dodge with the 3 points, and that could just be the difference. And one of the teams I also have in this, as you'll remember, is Cliftonville, probably one of the harder teams to place in here, because if there was a different result on Saturday, there'd be a different feeling about them. There was this down feeling again from their fan base, thinking, oh, we did well last year, we're obviously loving it after the cup, but we've lost the three attackers which we've all been talking about week in and week out, and Ashford, Wilson and Hale. But broadly, outside of some results, the performances have been improving. They got a great win against Loughgall where they were flexing their muscles. They should have beat Linfield on Tuesday night, and there's no doubt about that in that game. And I looked at that and go, is that a great draw for Cliftonville, or have they dropped 2 points by not being cutting edge enough? And I said on Tuesday night, thinking, you know what, they are potentially in this league right now where the top teams are kind of drawing and losing here or there. Cliftonville could go on a run if they can try and establish the Taylor Stevens, the Axel Peisolds, Conlons and others as keystones of their team again, in the same way they did last year. Like last year's Cliftonville could be in with a shout this year, the way things are set up. You lose to Ballymena away from home and that looks like an awful take again. Nonsense. They're still within a win of Linfield on top, but they don't have slippage in the same way to give those results away if you kind of want to be a sneaky title team. So Cliftonville will have those days, and to be third, 3 points off, you'll take it. You'll resent the missed opportunities that they've had, but they do seem to be improving. 2 steps forward, maybe 1 step back on Saturday, but it's not a feeling of we're really bad. There's signs of life, and very good life, I find.
Yeah, as you say, there the three attackers last season. How do you replace those three? You can't really just wave your magic wand and replace them. I think the one they'll be probably most disappointed in is Ashford. I think he was probably the one that there's not really another of his type that maybe they could have got Ben Kennedy, because I think he's a similar enough sort of that Leroy Miller again, ghosting player, hard to mark, Um, is he a striker? Is he a midfielder? Is he a winger? Is he just sort of exists and then all of a sudden he scores? Um, I don't think they've had that this season the same way they did last season. They're back relying on Joe the goal for a lot of their goals as well. Which, if I was,
He's looking all right. I think he's
he,
looking okay.
he is. That being said, though, considering the amount of minutes he's played over the last couple of seasons, he looked to be kind of certainly in the twilight of his career, or edging towards at least. I think if I was a Cliftonville fan, I would be, as you say, happy enough to be where we are, or where they are, sorry. But I think if they finish third this season, I'll be very surprised.
They're not as dynamic, are they?
No,
But also they haven't swapped that lack of dynamism for solidity either.
no. Now, don't get me wrong. I still think Johnny Addis is one of the best defenders in this league. The way he is on the ball, the way he can organise a defence, I think he's an outstanding player. Um, but again, as you say, against Ballymena, yes, they're flying high. 3-2 with a penalty in the last couple of minutes, sort of does that paper over cracks a wee bit, does it make it look closer than it was? I don't know. So for me, if I'm a Cliftonville fan, I'm annoyed to lose to Ballymena. Very annoyed. Less so, as you say, with the where they are, but I still think that it's very difficult to place Cliftonville at the minute. If they're there come the end of the season, I think they've had a good year.
A team that is also hard to place right now. Although, would you have expected too much more? Coleraine, 3 wins, 4 draws, just the 1 loss. The manner of those draws in particular isn't great for a team that is supposed to be full time, I think. You would like to have added at least one more win into that column and they would be second. There's been flashes of great stuff, but oftentimes you're thinking, why are you left here trying to chase this game or trying to finish it late? And they're getting goals 13, they're conceding them as well 9. I just think broadly they didn't know what they were in for this year, and to be sitting top 6, 4 points off top, some players that will hopefully get better for them. It can't be doom and gloom. At least it might not be rainbows and sunshine, but it's not doom and gloom up at Coleraine. It's trusting the process and seeing where it goes.
Yeah, I think that's the important phrase is trust the process. I think Oren currently moving up there as the director of football role and bringing Dean Shields in, I think actually is a good move because Dean's very much a head coach rather than maybe the manager that he was at Dungannon or other places. I think that suits him and his personality much better. And I think Oren is quite happy to kind of take a bit of a step back. They're finding out what it is to be a full time team. I questioned whether the investment was actually there. I know that a lot of was made about it, but whether it was actually a genuinely enough of an investment to properly warrant full time, or whether it was just sort of, there's a few players there that you've got to. I mean, I think I was talking to somebody and we sat down and worked it out. For you to have a full time player, you've got to pay them a minimum of £432 a week. So if you have a full time squad of 20 players, do the sums. That's a lot of money.
They haven't been massively tested now. Like you think of the points that they could have got. They throw away 3 points, or 2 points technically, against Portadown. I don't think they should have lost to Glenavon at home, even though they weren't particularly great just in the circumstances there. The other games that they're getting, it's not like we have a whole collection of victories over Linfield and the like. So I think the big games are coming their way. I like Murray that they've signed. He's a man that's coming in with experience and has a bit of quality. Reece Campbell, I think, has hit the ground running for them. What a replacement for McKendry. This McGonigal-Shevlin rotation thing is weird, and I also want to completely avoid for my fantasy teams, which I have. But Shevlin coming on and playing angry, like the goal he scored there on Saturday, yes, it was late on, But to have the determination to come and do that, maybe it's a good thing to kind of have these players playing off each other. But they have the skill, they have the talent. It's just they don't feel totally solid. And when they've been rocked and shaken, they've turned to jelly.
They have been a little bit naive at times in some games. Um,
Massively.
Again, like you mentioned there, about their only loss was at home to us. I think that was a bit of a sucker punch. We scored early from a goal that
Very Dungannon
a
of
lot
you.
of people thought was offside. Well,
It was
we're not
offside,
getting
but we'll move on.
that. Certainly, if you can go lose only one game every 10 games, you're potentially losing a maximum of 4 or 5 in a season. And that puts you comfortably top four, provided you win as many as they have.
Slipping down to a category that I've named not surprised, still disappointed. It's Linfield and Cruz. For different reasons. It's weird to have a team below expectations, kind of technically, below meeting expectations for a team that's top of the league. But they bossed everybody that they faced against up until a 95th minute Ryan Mays rocket. And since then, they've looked shaky, they've looked meek, they don't look to have any kind of confidence. They were flat track bullies for sure, and they built up the points that have got them where they are right now. They are a last minute free kick from drawing at home to the bottom side in the league. It's clear what the fans of Linfield are saying. Where is our attacking flair? Why are we able to be done in the way that we have been at the back? They've only conceded 5, but the manner of some of the goals have been disappointing. So they are no thrills, somewhat spills, but they're still up at the top. But the expectation is and always has been massive. The 1 loss and 2 draws could not be there. They could have 24 points from the 8 games played, and they've got Lawrence sitting there on 5. 21 points, 3 games the difference to try and track back. And then you can do all your messing around and the rest. So I don't think they look good against Cliftonville at all, even though they probably could and should have won it on Tuesday night with that Cooper goal. I don't know if that was offside, but some people questioned. I don't think there's really a camera angle I can tell you if Fitzpatrick was offside. I couldn't see it. But again, that could have been it. That is what Linfield can do. They can just get a wee quick fire goal like that. I think they got away with it. That perhaps, I'm not crying about it as a neutral in it, but I do think Cliftonville had a shout in that McGee kind of bring down there in the penalty box. The Cliftonville could have got the penalty. So look, draws against top 6 sides, just what Linfield do. Unfortunately, if you're a Linfield fan, but it's been standard fare while also being missed opportunities along the way, despite being top of the league and 9 points on Larne.
They haven't looked, even in the games they've won this season, bar a couple, haven't looked massively convincing. I think the whole speculation around David Healy leaving probably didn't help and was a little bit unsettling as well. I still don't think Joel Cooper's back to his best, although he has been really good. I think now that Sam Roscoe's injured, they're going to really, really feel that, because I thought he scored a few goals this season and he's kind of taken on that sort of Jimmy Callagher role at the back, where he's scoring at one end and sort of helping keep them last ditch out at the other end. I still think I'll agree with nearly every Linfield fan that I know, they needed that Matthew Fitzpatrick is not the 20 goal a season striker they want. Yes, he's very good, and I've said it before, and I loved him when he played for us. But his game is not just score those 20 goals a season that you need as a Linfield team, and they don't seem to be able to. They're not blowing teams away like they have in previous seasons. They're still winning those games. Not that they're certainly not fortunate. I don't think you're ever fortunate to be top of the league. They're not convincing as leaders. That would probably be the best way to describe it. And I think, again, it's very much down to how Larne can manage the workload of the European stuff, along with their catching up of their league games. If they win those 3 league games, then it becomes a different kettle of fish because they're up there second, third, and they're knocking on the door again. And the fact that Larne were able to beat Linfield as well at Windsor, that's a big statement. And I think that would have knocked a lot of confidence out of Linfield.
We've got a question from Samuel asking, do we think that David Healy will regret ultimately not leaving Linfield when he had the chance? Has he taken the team as far as it can go? Will the board back him in the way that he will require after the summer that he's had in January, try and get this team over the line? It's always a tough question to answer. It's easy to look back on all the speculation and where Linfield are now, because it was just before that Portadown game where it's become slightly shaky. I think it's if there was a more solid landing spot for him, because as we discussed at the time, Wraith were not the most solid footing team to go to, and you're giving up Linfield and a team that you've built going for it again. So I don't think you can only make the decision what's in front of you, and I think it was going to be a risk for Healy to go for it. Now maybe it should have been the right risk at the right time, but he backs himself. Clearly, you got to at that level of the game, and I think he's very satisfied with his decision, despite it not going sterlingly. You got to believe that opportunity is going to come again based on what you can offer as a manager.
I think that the biggest question, certainly if I was in his shoes, the most recent comparison you can make is Oran Kearney going to St Mirren. I think, I mean, the way it was set up for Oran, with it, essentially being part time, he was able to take a career break. He was able to go over and kind of suck it and see a little bit. Where, and I don't want to do Roddy McAree a disservice to say this, but he was almost keeping the seat warm for him while he was over there testing the waters as a full-time manager. And he came back pretty much straight away, walked into that job, back into the job. Would David Healy, if he went to Wraith and it didn't work, would he then be able to walk straight back into the Linfield job if whoever took over from him didn't make a good going of it? And I think the answer is probably a resounding no. And that for me would play into it quite a bit, is if this doesn't work out, where do I go from here? At Linfield, provided I keep, we're challenging for the league and cup and doing relatively well in Europe and continuing that, then I think for me, if I'm in David Healy's shoes, I'm going, this is a better bet. And as you say there, this is a team that I've built. I'm starting again from scratch. That being said, if it's a team that I've built, then they've got to start producing and being more convincing.
Also in the silo of not surprised but still disappointed, it's the Crews. What do we say about the Crews? 3 losses in a row, vitally 2 of them at home to Glenavon and Portadown. Yeah, far in a wee Dungannon away loss. Steinmore Park truly is a hard place to go to, but they haven't scored in any of them. And they get royally torn to pieces across the 90 minutes by Portadown come the end of that game. I mean, they had the chances, but did they really work any of the goalkeepers in those games? I mean, if we're talking about Linfield and looking for that killer striker, I know he's constantly talked about in this podcast, but Offord, my goodness, he is a striker. He can do it all. Truly one of those players where you're holding your breath if he has the ball at his feet. Doesn't matter if he only has a couple of inches between him and the other defender. He has the ability to squeeze it or just nick a wee yard and wrap his boot around it. He can run, he can move, he has the stature. He is a true danger man. Now, that's all good when he hasn't been able to break down Portadown, Glenavon or Dungannon, but I still say not surprised but disappointed, or still disappointed, because I think Crews fans expected something like this eventually, and actually the season started very well, but I pontificated that perhaps Crusaders are better against the top sides and are struggling to motivate themselves or break down the lesser sides in the league, and so far that has come to fruition um, since that game, these games. So there is a certain feeling of keep calm and mix it up, and you shouldn't be panicking right now. But there's still a feeling of we're not used to this. The last time they got beat by Portadown, I mean, what was it 2015 or something? Like Brexit hadn't happened. Like that's how long ago it was until Portadown has won at Seaview. So that just shows how they're so not used to that, and they'll not feel confident until they get their next win back. Really, it's the first test of Declan Cadell's management. Now,
I think Declan Cadell has the potential to be a good manager. I just think he's been thrown in a wee bit at the deep end. I'm not really sure what went on behind the scenes at the Cruise to lead to Baxter wanting to go. He's certainly being tested, and I think at the minute he's being found slightly wanting. Again, like we're only 8-9 games in. Let's chat in January when he's had another transfer window to bring in a few players and see how that goes. But if I'm a Cruise fan and we're sitting eighth at the minute, and again, Portadown, Dungannon, and Ballymena are all above us, I'm sort of going, we're a little bit below par here and we're being left behind. This is going to change. That I think, I mean, like you said, they were out fought in those games they lost. It wasn't as if they were necessarily out skilled as such. But that being said, the 3-0 defeat to Portadown, I think Portadown played Crusaders at their own game of what people would have thought or were used to seeing from Crusaders. That kind of picking up the second balls, running at players, being in the channels, and in the end, they were found very wanting.
they've still got experience there in O'Rourke, Ross Clark, but there's a lot of fresh faced people in Jude White, Kieran Alford's in there, Hy Franklin, and Blaney, and are they just adjusting to the game slightly when they're getting a flick on the nose? They're still Laurie's out at the minute. They lose Jordan Stewart. I think could have done a lot of damage against Portadown there. I believe in the warm up, or at least he was announced, and then was replaced by Teelan. So it hasn't really found its strongest 11 right now. The Cruise, and I think this isn't. I'd be very surprised that I don't think this is the start of a mega slide. Does it indicate that they might slip away from the top six? Yeah, but they're still only 3 points off it. So they can still do damage against plenty of teams. We saw that, but the way things have gone, they will be disappointed by the way things are playing out recently. And look, final category, below expectations. I think you could have named this before it went anywhere. It's Carrick and Loughgall, and it's definitely Loughgall and then Carrick. I've said it numerous times in this podcast. I think Loughgall haven't fallen away. Other people have just risen above them. Defence isn't as strong as it was. They aren't picking off teams around them in the same way, in that they're drawing against Portadown and Glenavon compared to maybe sneaking 3 points against them. And you give them 4 points, it's really not feeling as bad as they are. But they're getting slightly trampled in games, despite having good players around them, and everybody that's worried about relegation issues, concerns, they're looking at Loughgall and hoping that they lose every week. And at the minute, they are. And they're just going to have to try and play their way out of it. I think as a Loughgall fan, you'd probably shake my hand for 11th. But again, somebody has to be below them for that to be the case. I think they're probably the favourites to finish last right now. But there still would be, compared to previous terms, probably the most talented team to finish 12th in Donkeys.
I think you're right on that one as well, because I look at teams like Loughgall, Dungannon in previous seasons, Ballymena even in previous seasons, Carrick in previous seasons, even a wee bit this year. They all play good. They all play good football. Yeah, they definitely are. But all of those teams play good football, and there's a lot of teams have gone down playing good football. Even Newry at different times last season played decent football, but they just weren't in enough games for enough of the time. And I think that's where, going back to what we were saying about Portadown, their ability to stay in games is what actually got them the points. The fact that there's so many goals in, we'll call it curry time, and that's the difference. Loughgall haven't had too many meaningful late goals, and they've conceded too many. Benji McKee going was a bit of a blow, but I think it was obvious that was going to happen. It was just a case of who was going to come in for him and who was going to cough up the money. But they haven't really been able to properly replace him. They've got Jay Boyd in there who looks okay, and obviously Nathaniel Ferris, who we all know what Nathaniel Ferris is. He's a good, proper, old-fashioned Irish League striker. Could probably score a few more goals, but he knows what the league's about, and he's an asset to any team that has him there. As you say, they haven't necessarily digressed or gone backwards, but they have because they've stood still. And unfortunately, when you're a Loughgall and you're a small club in a small village, rural village in County Armagh, you don't have the massive fan base. You don't have necessarily the massive investment that is coming throughout the rest of the league to be able to compete for some of the players that you would like to. Like I'm sure they would have loved to have the chance to sign John McGovern, but they didn't either get the deal for Benji McGee done in time for them to be able to do that, or they just didn't have the finances at all to be able to do that.
That will be interesting. What will they do with that money in January? Could we suddenly see some players coming in? I think there's talent there. Actually, Ryan Wade is an underrated player, disregarded player based on his time in Ballymena. Ferris is there, Jay Boyd's there. Consistency week to week's probably the questions for them. I like the attacking threat that a Hoey and Gibson can offer. At times, I'm clearly captain of the Adam Toe fan club. It's just at the back. It's can they tighten up and do they go back to 3-man back line? Are they missing Andrade on the right hand side as an outlet to get up and at teams? It's tough. 5 points actually looks okay in comparison, but it doesn't scream. But just with Glenavon getting results, Portadown getting results, and even maybe Dungannon and Ballymena running away with it just it puts the pressure on them. They're not getting the results in the same way.
And that's the big thing. Those teams again, like I was saying earlier, the teams that you would expect to be in and around you, like Larne are in a false position. Let's be honest. And I think Crusaders are slightly, like you're saying, below par. But I don't necessarily see them sitting around ninth, eighth, ninth come the end of the season. So people pull away. It's whether those other can come back, and it's whether then Carrick can rediscover some sort of form. Will that mean that Loughgall just fall away completely? That's going to be the worry for them.
Finally, then, are Carrick in a false position? That's 7 losses in a row on the bounce. The best of the bunch is perhaps the Linfield game on Saturday. They are missing players like Cushley, Allen, Andy Mitchell. I've been without Tilney for a while, but they just look so turgid as a team, which is what was so surprising about that game against Linfield. You'd think at home, big pitch, they'd be able to slice through them on the run via the pass, like so many other teams have. The theory of Carrick has worked out. It's been put to good use. They had their best season last year. It just looks like it's flipped. But we go to this. They've only played 8 games, but we go to this as kind of a quarter of the way through the season, and they're looking up at Portadown with 9 points on them. Dungannon with 11 points on them. They'll always have Loughgall in their sights, even though Loughgall was able to really take advantage of their frailties. Goalkeeping is a problem, I think, between collecting the ball from corners, just a few bits and pieces. There was question marks about the free kick there. Carrick fans have mentioned that to me, so I now think talk of 7th and beyond, even this early, will dissipate, and if they're not careful over the next couple of weeks, they could be somewhat condemned to getting away from bottom of the table as their main aim for the season. It will be at this stage for sure, but when you're without Allen, Danny Gibson is MIA so far as an attacking threat. Michaelitis isn't getting goals. They don't look like they're coming from anywhere, and they're getting run on at the back. They're physical, absolutely, but they're relying on Hickney to do the business, and it's likely that we're going to see more games like they're losing 1-0 due to mistake against Portadown than we are the rollicking of Glenavon, which you saw at the start of the season. It's the alarm bells are ringing out, and it's not going to get any easier.
And if you look at their next few fixtures as well, I wouldn't be too hopeful. I mean,
which is Dungannon away, home to Cliftonville, home to Larne, away to Glentoran, and then away to Mourneview Park the Saturday before Halloween. Points can be gotten. We've seen it in this league so far. If you're a Carrick fan, you'll think Saturday was the turnaround. The turnaround in points need to happen sooner rather than later. And when you're behind the 8 ball, when you are behind these teams, it's if Dungannon win, they get 3 points on you, and it's even further away. Forget the points that you've missed out on. So it's the pressure starting to mount now, even this early on.
Yeah, I think the main difference between, if we're looking at Loughgall and Carrick in the same category at the minute, the investment that has been put into Carrick over the last season or so versus what's available at Loughgall, and the players that Carrick have brought in are, there were teams with far greater ambitions trying to sign some of the players that Carrick have signed. I think that's the main. Certainly, if I was a Carrick fan, I would be sitting going, "What's going on here?" These other clubs who have signed decent players, big names, have been able to get them to gel. We haven't. What's going on here? And as you say, like there are a couple of guys there who are, big players. Any team with Curtis Allen in it, I think, is a threat.
It's getting them on the pitch.
That's been the issue certainly over the last couple of seasons, because Curtis Allen, on his day, is again one of the most unplayable players in that league, ridiculously talented, and it's just his fitness seems to let him down. And I think that's the main thing, and that's probably why I would say, not only because they're bottom, but because of the way they're bottom, and with the investment that has been put in, why I think Sturdy King is under massive pressure at the minute. I mean, he's admitted it himself in interviews recently, and it wouldn't surprise me that if they don't pick up, put it like this, they're looking at Cliftonville on Saturday. The Cliftonville game at home coming up as a game they're going to win. But because of where they are, they have to win that. Whereas before they were going, let's, the game that we can get a point out of and move on to the next one. But because of it, you're sort of going, oh dear, we've got to win this game.
Well, if he's sitting here listening to this at, 3:30 in the morning, scheming for the next game, will you give him any solace in saying that you think that add 3 more quarters onto this season, they'll not be 12th?
A lot will tell. What will be told if they go to Steinmore Park and get hammered by Dungannon. Because if they do, I can't see him being here. That's the truth. Unfortunately, I like Sturdy, and I think his teams generally are quite good, but I can't see him. Depending on the manner of a defeat at Steinmore Park, if it's very convincing, if it's another 1-0 like it was on Saturday, where there's shoots of optimism, where it's a bit more like the Carrick that should be turning up, or if it's a walkover, then I don't think he has much hope. Unfortunately,
I do think that ultimately they'll not finish last. I think they've got too much in the team to come in to scrap in those games to win out, because they know how to win. They've done that a lot of time. Hasn't been always consistent, but I think they have it. The frustration from a Carrick fan point of view is, will they have enough to go beyond into 10th? I think 11th might be a bit of a glass ceiling for them if Glenavon, particularly Portadown and Dungannon, keep nicking results along the way. We look ahead to the next week. By the time a majority of you are listening to this, Larne have taken on Loughgall, and we could see a repeat of that excellent result Loughgall against Larne. But I think at Inver Park, it's likely to be a Larne victory. But I keep saying that, and they keep giving away draws and whatever. So Loughgall will go into that game with no fear. 1-0 going into injury time against Coleraine will give them confidence. I think that's a tough all game for them. But look at the games this weekend. Cliftonville, Larne, Solitude. It's the stream game. I do just think that this is another draw. I think it will be a score draw, like a 2-2 or 1-1. But Cliftonville have goals, and they usually do okay against Larne. Bar, of course, that thumping that they received near the end of last year. But they got them good in the semi-final. So, interesting little mix-up here. I can see Larne coming back and a very similar affair to what we saw on Friday night. Get the goal, hold on, and kind of choke the game into submission. But it's going to be a 2-2 draw for me. It's just, I think Larne will come back and get the draw.
I think a lot will be that this is really where Larne have that sort of, what was it, Tyrone said a game every 3.5 days or something like that. I think that will play a lot into it, and the game on Friday will be dictated a little bit by how well or how poorly they manage to see off Loughgall on Tuesday. So I think I agree with you. It will be a score draw, probably 1-1.
Let's go to the big game on Saturday. Portadown Ballymena. Big game potentially at the top of the table this, which I didn't think I'd say weeks ago. It's at Shamrock Park. Again, I'm getting slightly, not frustrated, but perturbed by this idea that such and such is a tough place to go. I got my book out and I started trying to get results based on some teams. I think factually, Taylor's Avenue is not a tough place to go. They don't do well themselves. So I don't want any manager to say this is a tough place to go based on the past season and a bit. It's broadly not. But Shamrock Park has become that. But here comes Ballymena. It's clear that what Portadown will have to do is try and put the shackles on Ben Kennedy, as every team has tried and failed to do. Not give away the set pieces, which I think with big towering defenders in McKinnon and somewhat Altentop they can deal with. Portadown could catch them on the break. This is a 0-0 or like a 4-3.
Yeah, I think both teams have scored late goals, so don't be surprised if there's nothing happened too early on. A bit of a difficult one to call, again, because they're doing so well, both clubs, respectively. Then again, it could just turn out to be an absolutely boring 0-0 where they both have stinkers. Highly unlikely. So no, I think that likewise, if Ballymena can manage to thwart the likes of Brian Mays and the runs he makes, I think it'll be, both teams will be quite wary of the other team's attack. And I think that's going to be why I think it's likely to be a lower scoring, because it'll be, I think both teams will be trying to nullify the opposition, especially with Portadown being at home. Ballymena will want to go there and not get beaten. And with Ballymena being second, I think Niall Curry will try to be a bit more astute. And if we're in it with 10 minutes to go, he'll be saying to the guys, then we can go for it like we have done in a few games this season. But I do think it'll be low scoring draw.
I'm going to stick my neck out. I'm going to say 4-3 Ballymena. I think Portadown will go 3-1 up, red card. Then Ballymena will score from that penalty and it'll be 2 late goals and it'll be pandemonium. 4-3 Ballymena. I've had some pretty nifty predictions go my way. If this goes the way I just said, it'll be my piece de resistance. Coleraine.
You have to put a bet on that.
I refuse. Coleraine against Linfield. I mean, I actually think this might be the coming out game for Coleraine. I think this is 2-0 them. Linfield have always found it tough going up to the Coleraine showgrounds. Coleraine have just been excited not to lose to Linfield sometimes, which is why it's always been like a 0-0 scrappiest game of all time. Hasn't been a classic for a long time, or Korean or shuffling their feet, going 1-0 disappointed, but at least we played okay. Not this time, baby. Reece Campbell from 35 yards out, finished late on by a McGonagall goal, 2-0 Korean, and Linfield fans will panic. But yes, I don't know where this belief comes from but I think we're expecting a surprise Korean result. I think it's going to happen this Saturday.
I think the way that Linfield got out of jail on Saturday against Carrick, you may not be wrong, but I think they're more likely to bounce back from that, play as poorly. Well, not as poorly, but certainly not as convincingly, shall we say. I'm more inclined to go for a 2-1 win for Linfield.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. I'm probably more closer to a 2-1 win for Swifts over Carrick. I know we talked about it there, but Carrick may get an early goal themselves and feel confident, and it's the Swifts who have to climb back. I don't see it as a great matchup for Carrick, just with the speed of passing that the Swifts have. They could just do one on them. Neat little passing at the top of the pitch, triangles, ping it out wide. Maguire running on. I think it's 2-1. It might be late, but I think the Swifts will get it across the line.
I think it'll be even more convincing than that, if I'm totally honest.
Oh, it's big belief in Roddy McAree.
Yeah, I think more so because Dungannon do play a very good brand of football, and I think that Carrick struggle against teams that do that are less direct in the sense that, I mean, I think that's where we got it wrong against them in the first game of the season. And I think other teams have seen that in the fact that they have very good physical centre halves, but in Luke McCullough, in Albert Watson, in Cameron Stewart, in Mark Trojan if he plays there, and other players there, they're not very mobile. So if you can turn them the way a Maguire or a McGovern can, then you're in real trouble. So either Carrick sit very deep to avoid the ball in behind and give them loads of space in the middle of the park, or they try to push up and choke them and risk that ball over the top and behind. Either way, I'm gonna say 4-0 Dungannon.
Glens against Glenavon. I know you'll be skewed with your affiliations, but I don't know. I think this is a 2-1 victory for Glentoran. I think maybe Glenavon will score early via McDade, but I think they'll come back and they'll be beating their chest, thinking, "Here we go."
Yeah, I actually will agree with you on this one. I think if we can get a draw, I think we'll be happy with that. Continues an unbeaten run, gives us a bit more confidence going into the big one the week after. Two big ones the week after, but
Big pitch,
we'll not even get into that. But suffice to say, the Crusaders pitch is only, I think, half a meter wider on each side than our
Well, that's why
pitch.
you got a result. That's why you got a
It was,
result
yeah,
there.
yeah.
It's all part of the plan.
Absolutely, yeah, but no, the oval pitch is big. It is one of the biggest in the league, and I think we will struggle with that. Even if our pitch was the size that it always was, I still think we'll struggle because we do have quite a few injuries out still. I would agree with you. I think it probably will be maybe a 2-1 Glentoran.
Final game of the weekend, Lockall against Crews. Another tight pitch for the Crews to try and get themselves back on track. It's exactly the type of game that you want to try and get back on track. I think they will do this. I think it's 2-0. Watch them run to the byline and cut it back to one of these big floppy haired boys that they have if it ain't offered. And they had the chances on Saturday, but they just didn't hit the target. They need to do that to score goals. Spoiler alert. And I think they'll do it. I think they'll be assists for Ross Clark, 2 of them, and he'll find the boys in, and it'll be 2-0, kind of comfortable. They'll be scared off by Lockall, but 3 points will be going back up to North Belfast, and Lockall are sitting kicking their own heels.
Again, I will agree with you on that one. I would say it could even be 3-0. I thought that Crews were very wasteful against Portadown last week. They lacked a lot of composure in front of the goal. which is not something you can say normally for a Crusaders team. They're usually quite accomplished. But I think that, as you would say, that this is probably a game that they will be looking for. It will be physical. And I think they'll want to be more up for it than they have been in the last couple of games. And there's no way Declan Cadell will let them lose 4 in a row. Can't see that happen. So I'm going to say 3-0 Crusaders.
Fair. David, been a big one, been a long one, been a good one. You did your research and it shone like the bright little star that you are. If people want to find such further delights, where can they find them online? Please tell me you have a TikTok page somewhere.
I do, but I don't really use it. It's more so for when people, so I can actually watch things when people actually send them to me and pretend that I'm.
When are we going to have the first Irish League food reviewer? That's what I want. I want someone to do. Today I went down to Mornview Park to check out the delicious burgers that they had. They had an eloquent selection of food. I was tempted by the authentic cheesy chip. That's what my friend got, but I got the burger with sauce and whatever.
Well,
That's
here's one thing that I
want.
will say to you. Andy Gilkison, who's done all of our food for years. Big shout out to Gilky. It is comfortably the food he produces some of the best I've ever had in the Irish League. The burgers are good at Ballymena, definitely. But the food that Gilky produces on a weekly basis is outstanding, and I'd comfortably pay 2 or 3 times the price of what he charges most for it. Be interesting. I do have a couple of friends who do food blogs, so maybe I'll get them along to do a slightly tongue-in-cheek review of some of his food.
Zero tongue-in-cheek. I want the legit thing, buzzwords and all. So yeah, look, there's the idea. You take it away, mate.
Watch this space.
Absolutely. And so how can people get on the ground floor of this TikTok empire of yours? And you can also do Twitter if you want to as well. Why not?
Yeah, probably easier found on Twitter at wavy_dot. That's where I am, and then obviously at Glenavon _FC.
Excellent, David. It's been a delight. I would truly mean that. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Yes, didn't get down to all the questions. What I will do is this was quite a busy show this week, so I just thought I would add in the ones that felt relevant. Some really good ones I want to save maybe for next week when I have a bit more time. So thanks if you got involved and asked a question. It's not limited to Mondays. You can ask questions, thoughts, opinions, whatever it may be. My DMs are always open. Maybe it would just help me that if you just went, mailbox and then you give me your thought, your whatever went down. It's always helpful, so I'm reflecting on something that happened at your game. Questions as well, DMs, tweet along the tweet that I'll try and get out on Mondays. I always record Monday evenings, usually. Or, of course, you can email kickandmatch@gmail.com. Where's the Twitter, I hear you say? Yeah. You said that? Yeah, sure. Yeah, good question. It's Kicking Match, at Kicking Match on Twitter. It's at Kicking Match on Instagram. It's at Kicking Match on TikTok if you want to see the one video uploaded. It's very exciting, and your views would be noted. I'll note them down. Thanks for that. Follow me on all them. Be nice. Be fine. Be great. Be well. Be here next week, or there'll be trouble. Bye. Bye.